Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Like,
Housing, never far from the political agenda.
yeah.
I'm not really, I mean, I think people have kind of switched off when they see all these political leaders saying, we must build more houses, we've got a
Oh, I know.
plan. Um,
Mm.
but what's the situation? I mean, presumably people are getting to be a bit happier that mortgage rates might be coming down soon. Not necessarily today, but at least inflation
No.
rates are down.
Well, it feels like we've been waiting forever,
Yeah.
doesn't it? I get people phoning me all the time saying, should I stick or twist? Should I go now? Should I make the leap?
Yes.
What's going to happen? Where's the crystal ball? And we were hoping, early summer that we might get some good news, but today does not look like the day. Much more likely to be August.
Right.
And actually, when we look ahead, the predictions are now that it's going to be 4.75 in a year's time or 18 months' time. So it's not going to be a huge change. But of course, as that famous supermarket says, every little does help, and it will make a big difference to people because they're facing massive increases in their average mortgage payment and have been for a long time now.
Yeah, it says here that from a Zoopla study, the average first-time buyer now needs a household income of more than £60,000. I mean, I talk to
Yeah.
people now, particularly in London, and I know this will sound ridiculous for people outside of London, but a household income of £60,000 in London is not really going to make you feel very wealthy, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. I'm finding that first-time buyers, London, Southeast, and in other hotspots, they are having to buy together. People can't afford to buy their first property on their own. And £60,000 is an awful lot. And put on top of that the deposit you have to have.
Yeah,
If the average deposit, I think the Zoopla thing was 20%, well, on an average first-time buyer house, that's £50,000.
right.
You're paying rent. It's very, very difficult to save up that amount of money.
And that's the kind of thing that Rishi Sunak's been saying they want to change, isn't it? Because they're sort of offering guarantees, they're offering sort of, help to people to get the deposit together. But I'm always a bit
Yeah.
wary of central government stepping in to what is essentially, a private business and a commercial business. It's never a good idea in my view.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And the mortgage guarantee scheme that they have brought out, which they say they will continue on with, really, I'm not sure how much it helps, in my experience as a broker, how much it helps the
Mm,
purchaser. It actually is just guaranteeing the loan to a certain extent from
right.
the bank.
Yeah.
So it helps the bank.
Yes,
Now,
it helps the bank, and in the
that's
end, if,
wrong.
if, 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 if it all goes horribly wrong and house prices
Hmm.
tumble, as we saw during the sort of 2008 crisis,
Yeah,
suddenly we're all left holding the bag, and everybody's going, well, where does the
exactly.
money? How do we owe all this money? And suddenly you've
Yeah.
got the banks getting rescued, property companies getting paid off, and the poor old consumer getting stooked once again.
Yeah, we've got the negative equity, and sayonara. Yeah. There's something slightly wrong about it, I
Yeah,
feel.
yeah. Well, there is. I mean, I've always said that I'm sadly old enough to remember I've had some good experiences buying houses and some bad ones.
Yeah, me too.
And unfortunately, people got to begin to believe that actually buying a house was a guarantee of making money. Well, it isn't.
Mm. No, and I think we have to change our mindset. We do have this Englishman's home is his castle
Yeah.
sort of mindset, and this drive from the previous generations that your goal in life is to buy your own home and then pay off your mortgage.
Yeah.
People I speak to now, the younger generation, they have no sort of desire or even concept that by the time they're 65 they're going to retire, because
Mm.
that's not happening, and also have paid off their mortgage. They're taking out longer and longer terms because they've got to somehow get that monthly payment to an affordable level. And the idea that they will probably owe money on their house until the very
Mm.
last minute it doesn't put them off.
No. And
And when
also,
I was growing up, that wasn't the thing.
no, indeed. And also, it's not inconceivable that the landscape may change. I mean, if Labour get in and they decide to lump a load of, big property taxes on the size and cost of your property rather than, council tax or whatever, that could
Yeah.
change the landscape forever.
Absolutely. And there's been very little detail from either of the parties, or all the parties, in fact, about how are we going to move forward?
Mm.
How are we going to stimulate the market? Labour have been very quiet on stamp duty. Haven't heard anything about that
Mm.
at all. And we mustn't forget that come the end of March, stamp duty is set to change again. Our new thresholds are, set up from a few years
From
ago,
the
and they
90s, right?
expire.
Yeah.
Well, 2021, 22. So we go back down from, I always have to write it down because I forget, from £250,000 being the nil rate threshold back down to 125.
Yeah.
That's going to make a big difference, not just to first time buyers, but also anybody who wants to move. And if you stop people moving, then that slows down and stagnates the
Yeah.
entire property market. And it also stops people moving, social mobility in areas, different parts of the country.
Right.
It's not a good thing. And we do seem to get stamped by stamp duty a lot.
Yes,
It's
indeed.
very expensive.
Indeed. Sally, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to run. Mortgage broker on and the various different housing announcements. We've got time for a voice note from Mike. Have a